Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Horizon, watching the stars drift past through the large windows. It was a quiet Tuesday morning in space, the kind where nothing much happened. His crew was doing their usual jobs, checking systems and running scans of nearby planets. Jake had been in space for 15 years and he thought he had seen everything. He was wrong. "Captain, we have something strange on the sensors," called out Lisa Parker from her station. She was the ship's communications officer, a young woman with sharp eyes who never missed anything important. "There's a ship out there, but it's not moving right. Looks like it might be in trouble." Jake walked over to look at her screen. The ship was unlike anything he had ever seen before. It was long and thin, almost like a crystal that had been stretched into the shape of a needle. Strange lights pulsed along its sides, but they were weak and flickering like a dying flashlight. "How big is it?" Jake asked. "About twice the size of our ship," said Ryan Brooks, the tactical officer. He was a big man with steady hands who had served in the Earth Navy before joining the Space Fleet. "And Captain, it's not human. This isn't any design I've ever seen in our files." Jake felt his heart beat faster. First contact with an alien race was something every space captain dreamed about, but it was also dangerous. They had no idea if these aliens were friendly or hostile. "All stop," Jake ordered. "Red alert, but keep weapons powered down. If they're in trouble, we don't want to look like a threat." The bridge lights dimmed to red, and the crew moved quickly to their battle stations, but Jake kept the weapons offline. Something about the damaged ship made him think these aliens needed help, not a fight. "Captain, I'm getting a signal," Lisa said, her voice excited. "It's weak, but I think they're trying to talk to us." "Put it on the main screen." The front window of the bridge flickered and changed into a communication display. At first there was only static and strange noises. Then slowly, an image formed. Jake had to stop himself from stepping backward. The alien was unlike anything from Earth's movies or books. It looked like it was made of living crystal, with a body that seemed to glow from the inside. Its face was hard to understand, but Jake could see what might have been eyes, large and deep like pools of water. "This is Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian people," the alien said. Its voice was strange, like music played through broken glass, but the words were clear. "Is anyone there? Please, we need help." Jake took a deep breath. This was the moment that would change everything. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earthship USS Horizon. We can see that your ship is damaged. What do you need?" The alien's head moved in what might have been surprise. You are willing to help? Even though we are strangers?" "That's what we do," Jake said simply. "Are you hurt? Do you need medical help or repairs?" Veltar was quiet for a moment. When the alien spoke again, its voice was filled with something that sounded like hope mixed with despair. "Captain Morrison, I must tell you something terrible. My people are dying. Our worlds are being destroyed by creatures we call the Devourers. They eat planets, leaving nothing behind but empty space. We have tried to fight them, but they are too strong. We have lost 3 of our colony worlds already." Jake listened carefully. Behind him, he could hear his crew working quietly, but he knew they were all listening too. "We have traveled across the galaxy, asking for help from every species we could find," Veltar continued. "The Altarians said we were not their problem. The Centauri Federation told us they would not risk their ships for a lost cause. Dozens of other races have turned us away. They all say the same thing. The Devourers cannot be stopped, so why try?" The alien's image flickered as the damaged ship's power failed and came back online. "Our homeworld, SciFiPrime, will fall in 3 months. Maybe less. We have nowhere else to run, no one else to ask. I do not know why I am asking you, humans. Your people are new to space, and your ships are small compared to ours. But we have no one else left to turn to." Jake looked around his bridge. Lisa was staring at the screen with tears in her eyes. Ryan's jaw was set in the hard line it got when he was angry. The rest of the crew looked the same way, sad and angry that someone was being hurt and no one was helping. "How many people live on your homeworld?" Jake asked. "Nearly 2 billion souls," Veltar said quietly. Jake did not need to think about his answer. It came from somewhere deep inside, from the part of him that had always known right from wrong. "We'll help you." The silence that followed was so complete that Jake could hear the humming of the ship's engines. Veltar stared at him through the screen, and Jake could see that the alien was trying to understand what had just happened. What did you say?" "We'll help you," Jake repeated. "I don't know how yet, and I don't know if we can win. But no one should face the end alone. We'll stand with you." Veltar's crystal body seemed to glow brighter. "But Captain, you do not understand. Your people have no obligation to us. We have nothing to offer in return. This fight may cost you everything." Jake smiled, the kind of smile that had gotten him in trouble as a kid but had also made him the kind of man who became a starship captain. "Ambassador, let me tell you something about humans. When someone asks for help, we answer. It's just who we are." The communication ended a few minutes later, after they had arranged for the USS Horizon to escort the Zephyrian ship to the nearest human station for repairs. As the alien ship's image faded from the screen, Jake turned to his crew. "Lisa, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we just volunteered humanity for a war. Ryan, start running battle scenarios. We're going to need them." "Sir," Ryan said, carefully, "do you really think we can fight these devourers?" Jake looked out at the stars, thinking about 2 billion people he had never met, living on a world he had never seen, facing an enemy he could not imagine. "I don't know, Ryan. But we're going to try." The emergency meeting in Washington lasted 14 hours. President Helen Carter sat at the head of a long table, surrounded by the most powerful people on Earth. The room was full of tension, as everyone tried to understand what Captain Morrison had gotten them into. Admiral Kevin Ross was the first to speak. He was an old man who had fought in 3 wars and knew the cost of sending people to die. "Madam President, we need to be realistic here. Our entire space fleet has maybe 200 ships. Most of them are explorers, not warships. The Zephyrians have thousands of advanced vessels, and they're losing." Dr. Monica Shaw nodded in agreement. She ran the science division and had spent her whole life studying alien technology. "The Zephyrian weapons are centuries ahead of ours. Their shields can stop anything we have. If they can't win against these devourers, what chance do we have?" "None," said Senator Bill Crawford bluntly. He was a thin man who always worried about money. "This will bankrupt us. We'll send our entire fleet to die for aliens we just met. It's madness." But General Patricia Webb stood up slowly. She was a small woman, but when she spoke, everyone listened. "Senators, admirals, doctors, you're all missing the point. They asked for help." "So what?" Crawford shot back. "Lots of people ask for help. We can't save everyone." Patricia's eyes went hard. 2 billion people are going to die. Not soldiers, not politicians, ordinary people living their lives, families with children, and every other species in the galaxy has turned their backs on them. President Carter had been quiet through most of the meeting, listening to the arguments. She was a woman who had worked her way up from a small town to the most powerful office on Earth. She understood difficult choices. "What would it take?" she asked. "If we decided to help, what would we need?" Admiral Ross pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's military forces. "Everything we have. Every ship, every weapon, every trained pilot. We'd have to strip our defenses and send it all to Zephyrian space. If we lose, Earth would be defenseless." "And if we win?" the president asked. "If we win," Dr. Shaw said quietly, "we save an entire civilization, and we show the galaxy that humanity keeps its promises." The debate went on for hours. Some argued that Earth's first duty was to protect itself. Others said that hiding behind their own borders while genocide happened was not protection, it was cowardice. Finally, President Carter called for a vote. When it was over, the decision was close but clear. Humanity would honor Captain Morrison's promise. Within hours, the biggest mobilization in human history began. At the Luna shipyards, engineer Carl Johnson looked at the impossible task ahead of him. He had to take ships designed for exploration and turn them into weapons of war. Carl was a quiet man who solved problems with his hands and his brain. He had built his first engine when he was 12 years old. "We need more firepower," he told his team as they stood around a holographic model of a human cruiser. These ships were built to study stars, not fight alien monsters. "What about kinetic weapons?" suggested Amy Foster, one of his best engineers. She was young but brilliant, with an understanding of physics that amazed even Carl. "We can't match their energy shields, but maybe we can punch through them with raw force." Carl smiled. It was a crazy idea, but crazy ideas had always been humanity's strength. "Railguns. Big ones. We mount them on every ship we have." "Sir," another engineer said worriedly, "the power requirements would be enormous. We'd have to rebuild the entire electrical system of every vessel." "Then we'd better get started," Carl said. Across Earth, ordinary people heard about the mission and volunteered. They didn't volunteer because they were forced to, or because they were paid extra. They volunteered because it was the right thing to do. Amy Foster left her job at the Mars colony and her family to join the fleet. Her husband cried when she told him, but he also said he was proud of her. "Someone has to help them," she said. "It might as well be us." Marine Sergeant Tony Garcia had been planning to retire next year. Instead, he started training his unit for space combat. Tony was a tough man who had fought on 3 different worlds, but he had never faced anything like the Devourers. "Listen up," he told his Marines. "We're going to fight aliens that eat planets. They're bigger than us, stronger than us, and meaner than us. But we have something they don't have." "What's that, Sergeant?" asked one of the young Marines. "We're too stupid to know when we're beaten," Tony said with a grin. Ship designer Lauren Mitchell worked 72 hours straight, redesigning human vessels for deep space combat. She drank coffee until her hands shook and kept working. When her assistants told her to rest, she shook her head. 2 billion people, she said. "That's more than the entire population of Earth 100 years ago. We can sleep when they're safe." Not everyone supported the mission. Protests filled the streets of major cities. Some people thought humanity should focus on its own problems. Others were afraid that helping the Zephyrians would make the Devourers notice Earth. But for every person who protested, 3 more volunteered. Retired pilots came out of retirement. Engineers worked for free. Factories that had been making civilian goods switched to producing weapons and armor. The message was spreading across Earth and all the human colonies. When humanity gives its word, it keeps it. Dr. Shaw worked with her science team to understand what they were facing. The Devourers were unlike anything in Earth's databases. They seemed to be part machine, part living creature, and part something else entirely. "They don't just destroy planets," she explained to a room full of military leaders. "They consume them completely. Every molecule gets broken down and absorbed. They leave nothing behind." "How do you kill something like that?" asked General Webb. Dr. Shaw looked at the data again. "I don't know, but we're going to find out." The fleet that was assembling was unlike anything humanity had ever built. 200 ships of every size and type, from massive battle cruisers to small fighters. Each one had been modified with new weapons and armor. Each one carried people who had volunteered to risk everything for strangers they had never met. Admiral Ross stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, the flagship of the fleet. Through the windows he could see dozens of other ships preparing for the journey to Zephyrian space. He was an old soldier, and he knew that many of these brave people would not come home. But he also knew something else. In all his years of military service, he had never been more proud to be human. President Carter gave a speech to the world the night before the fleet departed. She stood behind a podium looking tired but determined. "We go not as conquerors or crusaders," she said. "We go as friends to people who asked for help. We may not return. The enemy we face has destroyed civilizations that were old when Earth was young. But we go anyway because someone has to stand up to monsters. Someone has to say that genocide is wrong, no matter who the victims are." She paused, looking directly into the camera. "Today, humanity keeps its promise. Tomorrow, we find out what we're really made of." The fleet launched the next morning. As the ships disappeared into hyperspace, heading for a war that would determine the fate of 2 civilizations, people across Earth watched and prayed. They had no idea if their fleet could win. But they knew one thing for certain. Humanity had answered the call for help. Now they would see if that was enough. The journey to SciFiPrime would take 3 months through hyperspace. Admiral Ross had turned the UES Liberty into a floating command center, with representatives from both species working together to plan their desperate defense. Captain Morrison found himself spending most of his time with Ambassador Veltar. The Zephyrian had been given quarters next to the human command center, and the two had developed an unlikely friendship during the long voyage. "Tell me about this concept you call loyalty," Veltar asked one evening as they sat in the ship's observation deck, watching the strange colors of hyperspace flow past the windows. Morrison thought for a moment. He was a simple man who had never been good with complicated explanations. "It means you don't abandon your friends. When someone trusts you, you don't let them down." "But we are not your friends," Veltar said, confused. "We had never met before our ship was damaged. Why would humans risk everything for strangers?" Morrison smiled. "Maybe that's the point. You don't have to know someone to help them. You just have to see that they need help." Veltar was quiet for a long time. The Zephyrian culture was different from humanity's. They were logical, careful people who made decisions based on facts and calculations. The idea of risking everything for emotional reasons was hard for them to understand. "My people have studied your military history," Veltar finally said. "We learned about battles where small human forces fought against impossible odds. The Alamo, where 200 men fought thousands. Thermopylae, where 300 held off an entire army. Stalingrad, where your people fought in the ruins of their own city rather than surrender." "Those were different situations," Morrison said. "Were they?" Veltar asked. "In each case, humans faced an enemy that was larger, stronger, and better equipped. Logic said they should surrender or retreat, but they fought anyway. Why?" Morrison looked out at the swirling colors of hyperspace. "Because some things are worth fighting for, even when you can't win." In the engineering sections, Carl Johnson and his team worked with Zephyrian scientists to create new weapons. The aliens were amazed by human creativity and willingness to try dangerous ideas. "You want to what?" asked Zareth, a Zephyrian engineer whose crystal body sparked with colors when he was excited. "Ram our ships into theirs," Carl explained calmly. "If our weapons can't punch through their armor, maybe our entire ship can." Zareth flickered through several colors that meant confusion in Zephyrian body language. "But that would destroy your ship and kill your crew." "Only if we can't get them out in time," Amy Foster said. She had been working on escape pod modifications for weeks. "We install emergency teleporters and automated pilots. The crew evacuates and the ship continues the attack run without them." "And if the teleporters fail?" Carl and Amy looked at each other. They had both volunteered for this mission knowing they might not come home. "Then they fail," Carl said quietly. "But the mission continues." Dr. Shaw had set up a laboratory in the ship's science section, where she worked with Zephyrian researchers to study everything they knew about the Devourers. What she found was terrifying. "They're not just aliens," she explained to Admiral Ross and the senior staff. "They're more like a living weapon that was designed to consume everything it encounters." The holographic display showed images of Devourer creatures, each one different but all sharing the same hungry, predatory look. Some were the size of buildings, others as large as mountains. All of them had too many teeth and eyes that seemed to burn with malevolent intelligence. "Individual Devourers are dangerous enough," Dr. Shaw continued, "but they're all connected to a central consciousness, a queen creature that coordinates their attacks. Cut off that connection and they become confused and vulnerable." "How do we reach this queen?" asked General Webb, who had insisted on coming along despite being 60 years old. Dr. Shaw brought up another image, a massive creature that looked like a cross between a squid and a space station. "She stays in the center of their fleet, protected by thousands of other Devourers. Getting close enough to disrupt her control would be a suicide mission," Admiral Ross finished. "Yes, sir. The Admiral studied the tactical display. We'll worry about that when we get there. Right now, let's focus on keeping as many of our people alive as possible." Throughout the fleet, humans and Zephyrians learned to work together. The cultural exchange was fascinating for both species. Zephyrians were amazed by human emotional bonds, the way humans would risk everything for each other without calculating the odds. Humans were impressed by Zephyrian technology and their calm, logical approach to problem solving. Marine Sergeant Garcia found himself training with Zephyrian warriors. The aliens were taller than humans and moved differently, but they were eager to learn human fighting techniques. The key to close combat is not to be stronger than your enemy, Garcia explained to a group of mixed human and Zephyrian soldiers. It's to be smarter and more determined. He demonstrated a move where a smaller fighter could use an attacker's size against them. The Zephyrians watched carefully, their crystal bodies flickering with interest. Your species fights with great passion, observed war leader Kethval, a Zephyrian military commander. We have always relied on superior technology and careful planning. Nothing wrong with that, Garcia said. But sometimes you have to be willing to break the rules. Sometimes you have to fight dirty. Pilot Amy Foster worked with Zephyrian flight instructors to learn how to handle their advanced fighters. The alien ships were fast and powerful, but they required a delicate touch that didn't match human piloting styles. Humans fly like they are angry at space itself, observed Flight Master Telwyn. You force your ships to do things they were not designed to do. Amy laughed. Sometimes that's the only way to win. If you only do what your ship was designed for, you'll only win fights it was designed to win. She demonstrated by putting her fighter through a series of maneuvers that made the Zephyrian instructor nervous. The ship protested, alarms sounding, but it performed moves that should have been impossible. Fascinating, Telwyn said. You treat your machine like a partner, not a tool. Everything's a tool if you use it right, Amy said, including yourself. As the fleet traveled through hyperspace, Admiral Ross coordinated with Captain Morrison and Ambassador Veltar to develop their battle plan. The strategy was simple because it had to be. They would arrive at SciFiPrime to find it under siege, and they would have to fight immediately. We can't match them ship for ship, Ross explained, studying the tactical projections. So we don't try. We hit them fast and hard, concentrate our firepower on their weakest points, and try to create enough chaos to get our people close to their queen. The casualty estimates are, Morrison began, then stopped. There was no point in talking about numbers when everyone already knew what they meant. I know, Ross said quietly. But we didn't come here to play it safe. We came here to win. Veltar watched the two humans discuss tactics that would certainly cost many lives. The ambassador was beginning to understand something important about these strange new allies. They didn't fight because they expected to win. They fought because it was right. Admiral, Veltar said, there is something I must tell you. Even if we defeat the Devourers at SciFiPrime, they will come again. They always do. This will not be the end of the war. Ross nodded. Then we'll fight again. And again after that, if we have to. But why? You could save your people now. Leave this system and be safe. The Devourers might never find Earth. Admiral Ross looked out at the swirling lights of hyperspace, thinking about his home and his family and all the people who had trusted him with their sons and daughters. Because running away isn't really being safe, he said finally. It's just being safe for now. Monsters like this don't stop. They keep growing, keep consuming, keep destroying until someone stops them. Might as well be us. The night before they were scheduled to arrive at SciFiPrime, Morrison couldn't sleep. He walked through the ship, checking on his crew and the Zephyrian passengers. Everyone was working, preparing for a battle that would determine the fate of billions of people. He found Dr. Shaw in her laboratory, still studying devourer biology by the light of her computer screens. Doctor, you should get some rest. She looked up at him with tired eyes. I think I found something, Captain. A weakness in their neural network. If we can exploit it, will it help us win? It might give us a chance. Morrison nodded. Then, keep working. A chance is all we need. He continued his walk through the ship, past Marines checking their weapons, pilots running final simulations, and engineers making last-minute adjustments to equipment that might mean the difference between life and death. In the observation deck, he found Veltar standing alone, looking out at the stars. Tomorrow we find out if we're heroes or fools, Morrison said. Does it matter which? Veltar asked. Morrison smiled. Not really. Either way, we answered when you called for help. The Zephyrian's crystal body glowed softly in the darkness. Whatever happens tomorrow, Captain Morrison. My people will remember that when we had no one else, humanity stood with us. That's what friends do, Morrison said simply. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace and into hell. HFY hung in space like a dying jewel, surrounded by creatures that defied description. The Devourers had wrapped their living ships around the planet like a massive web of teeth and claws. Each Devourer vessel pulsed with dark energy, and together they formed a nightmare that stretched across thousands of kilometers of space. Dear God, whispered Lisa Parker from her station on the USS Horizon. She had seen the images during their journey, but seeing the real thing was different. The Devourers weren't just ships. They were living monsters that moved through space, like predators hunting prey. Admiral Ross stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, watching his tactical display fill with red symbols representing enemy contacts. There were so many that the computer stopped counting at 10,000. All ships, this is Admiral Ross, he announced over the fleet communications. What you're seeing is exactly what we came here to fight. Yes, they're big. Yes, there are a lot of them. But remember, they asked for help, and we answered. Today, we show the galaxy what humanity is made of. The response came from 200 ships filled with people who had volunteered for this moment. Yes, sir, they said, and meant it. All ships, attack formation. We have a promise to keep. What happened next became legend. The human fleet charged into the Devourer formation like an angry swarm of hornets attacking a bear. The ships were tiny compared to the alien monsters, but they moved with a fury and determination that caught the Devourers by surprise. Captain Morrison led the first attack wave, diving between massive Devourer ships that could have swallowed his vessel whole. The USS Horizon, armed with the new railguns that Carl Johnson had designed, opened fire at point-blank range. The kinetic rounds punched through Devourer armor that had stopped energy weapons for centuries. The alien creatures shrieked, an awful sound that came through space itself, and turned to face this new threat. That's right, Morrison said grimly, as Devourer ships began moving toward his formation. Come and get us. Amy Foster led her fighter squadron in a desperate assault on the Devourer forward positions. Her modified fighter screamed through space, dodging energy blasts that could vaporize a mountain. The Zephyrian pilots flying with her were amazed by the crazy maneuvers she performed. Human pilots, your flying patterns make no sense. Flightmaster, Telwyn said over the communications. That's the point, Amy replied, spinning her fighter in a corkscrew pattern that let her slip between two Devourer ships. If we don't know what we're doing, they can't predict what we'll do. She fired her entire missile load into the weak spot between two armored sections of a Devourer ship. The explosion lit up space like a small sun, and the massive creature began to drift, dead. One down, Amy said. About 9,999 to go. On the planet's surface, the real horror was happening. The Devourers had landed millions of ground forces, creatures that walked on too many legs and had mouths full of teeth designed for tearing apart anything they encountered. They were systematically destroying every Zephyrian city, consuming everything in their path. Sergeant Garcia and his Marines had volunteered for the most dangerous job of all, a ground assault to buy time for the space battle. They dropped from orbit in small assault pods, landing in the middle of a Devourer feeding ground. Okay, Marines, Garcia said as his unit took cover behind the ruins of a Zephyrian building. Remember what we're here for. These things want to eat a planet full of people. Our job is to stop them. The Marines opened fire with weapons designed to kill the unkillable. Human ingenuity had created bullets that exploded after penetrating armor, grenades that released electromagnetic pulses, and combat suits that let normal humans fight creatures 10 times their size. Private Danny Hayes, who had never been in combat before volunteering for this mission, found himself face to face with a Devourer that looked like a cross between a spider and a shark. The creature was 3 meters tall and covered in armor that had turned aside Zephyrian weapons for months. Danny's rifle fired uranium core rounds at hypersonic velocity. The Devourer's armor held for exactly one shot. The second shot punched, through and exploded inside the creature's body. "They're not so tough," Danny said, surprised. "Don't get cocky, kid," Garcia replied, tossing a grenade at a group of smaller Devourers. "There's about 1,000,000 more of them." In space, the battle was going better than anyone had dared to hope. The human ships, smaller and more maneuverable than anything the Devourers had faced, were causing chaos in their formations. Every time the enemy tried to coordinate an attack, a human ship would appear from an unexpected angle and disrupt their plans. Dr. Shaw, working from her mobile laboratory aboard the science vessel UES Newton, was tracking the battle and analyzing Devourer behavior patterns. What she saw gave her hope. "Admiral Ross, I'm seeing something interesting," she reported. "The Devourers are having trouble adapting to our tactics. Their hive mind works well against predictable enemies, but we're too chaotic for them to process." "Explain," Ross said, even as he ordered his flagship to ram a Devourer cruiser that had gotten too close. "They're like a computer trying to run a program that keeps changing," Shaw said. "Every time they think they understand our attack pattern, we do something different. It's overloading their collective consciousness." Admiral Ross smiled grimly. "Then let's give them more chaos than they can handle. All ships abandon formation, free hunting. Hit them where they don't expect it." The order went out across the human fleet, and 200 ships scattered like leaves in a storm. Each captain began fighting their own private war, using tactics that ranged from brilliant to brilliant because they were insane. Captain Morrison found himself flying directly at the largest Devourer ship he could see, a creature the size of a city that pulsed with malevolent energy. His bridge crew looked at him like he had lost his mind. "Captain," Ryan Brooks said carefully, "that thing could swallow us whole." "That's what I'm counting on," Morrison replied. "Lisa, target their main sensor cluster. Ryan, prepare for ramming speed." The USS Horizon accelerated toward the massive Devourer, firing everything it had. The creature's attention focused on the tiny human ship racing toward it, and its massive jaws began to open. At the last second, Morrison pulled the ship into a sharp turn that brought them alongside the Devourer's head instead of into its mouth. The ship's entire missile load fired directly into the creature's eye cluster. The explosion was spectacular. The massive Devourer writhed in agony, its movements disrupting the formations of dozens of smaller creatures around it. "Target the big ones," Morrison announced to the fleet. "When the leaders hurt, the followers get confused." But the Devourers were learning. As the battle continued, they began to adapt to human tactics. Their movements became more coordinated, their attacks more focused. The tide was starting to turn. That's when engineer Carl Johnson proved that human creativity had no limits. "Admiral, this is Johnson aboard the UES Anvil," came the transmission. "Permission to try something really stupid." Ross, who was busy coordinating 3 different attack groups, replied, "What did you have in mind, engineer?" "I want to turn my ship into a bomb." The communication channel was quiet for a moment, then Ross said, "Explain." "I've rigged our reactor to overload in a controlled cascade. Instead of exploding all at once, it'll create a chain reaction that gets bigger and bigger. If I can get close enough to their command ship." Ross understood immediately. "How close?" "Close. Enough that we won't be coming back." Admiral Ross looked at his tactical display. The human fleet was holding its own, but barely. They needed something to break the stalemate. "Do it," he said. Carl Johnson and his volunteer crew piloted the UES Anvil on a one-way trip toward the center of the Devourer formation. The enemy tried to stop them, throwing everything they had at the single human ship racing toward their most protected vessels. The Anvil's armor was torn away piece by piece. Her weapons were destroyed. Her engines were failing. But Carl Johnson kept flying, held on course by nothing but determination and the knowledge that millions of people were counting on him. "This is for asking nicely," he said as the ship reached the center of the Devourer fleet. The explosion that followed lit up the entire system. The chain reaction Carl had designed consumed dozens of Devourer ships and sent shockwaves through their entire formation. More importantly, it disrupted their hive mind. Dr. Shaw watched her instruments as the Devourer command structure began to collapse. "Admiral, their neural network is failing. Individual ships are losing contact with the collective. All ships press the attack," Ross ordered. "Hit them while they're confused." What followed was the greatest military victory in human history. The Devourers, suddenly cut off from their collective consciousness, began fighting as individuals instead of a coordinated force. Human ships that had been barely holding on suddenly found themselves winning. Sergeant Garcia and his Marines, supported by Zephyrian ground forces, pushed the enemy back from the major population centers. Amy Foster and her pilots cleared the skies above the planet. Captain Morrison led a final assault that destroyed the remaining Devourer command ships. When the battle ended, both species had paid a terrible price. The silence after the battle was almost as terrible as the fighting had been. Dr. Shaw floated in her damaged laboratory aboard the UES Newton, watching the readings from her neural disruptor device. The machine had worked better than she had hoped. Across the Zephyros system, Devourer ships drifted dead in space, their hive mind permanently severed. "Admiral Ross, this is Shaw," she reported, her voice tired but triumphant. "The neural network is completely down. Individual Devourers are showing signs of confusion and panic. They're starting to retreat." From the bridge of the badly damaged UES Liberty, Admiral Ross surveyed the aftermath of the greatest space battle in human history. The tactical display that had been filled with thousands of red enemy contacts now showed mostly empty space, with scattered groups of fleeing Devourers. "All ships pursue and destroy any remaining hostiles," he ordered, "but maintain formation, don't get separated." The remaining human ships, barely 100 vessels still capable of fighting, moved to finish off the Devourer stragglers. It was dangerous work, even separated from their hive mind. Individual Devourers were still deadly predators. Pilot Amy Foster, flying one of the few fighters that had survived the battle, found herself chasing a damaged Devourer ship toward the edge of the system. Her fighter was held together mostly by emergency patches and determination, but it could still fly. "This is Foster," she reported. "I've got a runner heading for the hyperspace limit. Should I pursue?" "Negative," came Admiral Ross's voice. "Let it go. We've done enough." Amy watched the alien ship disappear into hyperspace, carrying news of this defeat back to wherever the Devourers came from. Part of her wanted to follow, to make sure the message was delivered, but she was too tired, and there would be other battles. On the surface of SciFiPrime, Sergeant Garcia and his Marines were helping with rescue operations. The planet had been badly damaged during the months of siege, but it was still alive. Zephyrian cities that had been partially destroyed were already beginning to rebuild. Garcia found Private Danny Hayes sitting on a pile of rubble, staring at the sky where the space battle had taken place. The young Marine had fought bravely during the ground assault, but he looked older now, aged by the things he had seen. "You okay, kid?" Garcia asked. Danny looked up at him. "Sergeant, how many people do you think we saved?" Garcia thought about it. The official numbers said 2 billion Zephyrians lived on this world, but that was just the start. If the Devourers had won here, they would have moved on to other worlds, other species. There was no way to count all the lives that had been saved by stopping them. "More than we'll ever know," Garcia said finally. 3 days after the battle, something unexpected happened. Ships began arriving in the Zephyros system. Not human ships or Devourer ships, but vessels belonging to all the alien species that had refused to help the Zephyrians. The Altarians came first, their sleek silver ships appearing at the edge of the system. Then the Centauri Federation arrived, followed by the Stellar Commonwealth and dozens of other civilizations that had turned their backs on the crisis. Captain Morrison, still commanding the damaged USS Horizon, received a communication from the lead Altarian vessel. "This is High Commander Zelthera of the Altarian fleet," came the transmission. "We have come to offer assistance in rebuilding efforts." Morrison looked at the dozens of alien ships on his tactical display. During the battle, when help was desperately needed, these same species had been nowhere to be found. Now that the fighting was over and the danger had passed, they suddenly wanted to help. "Where were you 3 days ago?" Morrison asked bluntly. "There," Was a long pause before the Altarian commander replied. We did not believe the Devourers could be stopped. Our analysis indicated that any resistance would be futile. So you left the Zephyrians to die. We made a strategic decision based on available data. Morrison cut off the transmission. He had no patience for politics or excuses. These aliens had made their choice when it mattered. The time for help had been during the battle, not after it. But Ambassador Veltar had a different perspective. The Zephyrian leader, his crystal body still showing stress fractures from the ordeal, met with Morrison in the observation deck of the USS Horizon. Captain, I understand your anger toward these other species, Veltar said. But we must think of the future. We will need allies if the Devourers return. Morrison stared out at the alien ships gathering near HFY. They're not allies, they're scavengers showing up after the real work is done. Perhaps. But they are also afraid. Word of what happened here is spreading across the galaxy. For the first time, someone has defeated the Devourers in open battle. That changes everything. Morrison thought about that. The aliens who had refused to help weren't coming here out of kindness or generosity. They were coming because they were scared. Scared that the Devourers would come for them next, and scared that they would need the same kind of help they had denied the Zephyrians. What do you want to do? Morrison asked. Veltar was quiet for a moment, looking out at the stars. I want to accept their help, but I also want them to understand what loyalty means. My people will never forget that when we had no one else, humanity answered our call. Over the following weeks, the reconstruction of HFY became a strange, kind of diplomatic dance. The various alien species offered technology, resources, and expertise, but they were clearly uncomfortable with the new dynamic. Dr. Shaw found herself in the unusual position of being consulted by alien scientists who had previously dismissed human research as primitive. They wanted to understand how the neural disruptor had worked, how humans had developed tactics that the Devourers couldn't counter. Your species approaches problems differently than we do, observed scientist Krelvak of the Centauri Federation. You are willing to accept casualties that we would consider unacceptable. Shaw thought about Carl Johnson and all the others who had sacrificed themselves. We don't accept casualties lightly, but we understand that some things are worth dying for, such as the right of people to exist, the idea that genocide is wrong, the principle that when someone asks for help, you help them. The alien scientist made notes in its data recorder. These are emotional responses, not logical ones. Maybe, Shaw said, but emotion won. Logic said the Devourers couldn't be stopped, so you didn't try. Emotion said they had to be stopped, so we did it. The political implications of the victory were enormous. For the first time in galactic history, a relatively primitive species had accomplished something that advanced civilizations had thought impossible. The balance of power was shifting, and everyone knew it. President Carter arrived aboard Air Force One, converted for space travel, to personally thank the survivors and negotiate new treaties. She met with Admiral Ross in his makeshift headquarters on HFY. Admiral, I'm proud of what you and your people accomplished here, she said. But I need to know. Are we ready for what comes next? Ross looked tired. He had lost too many good people, and the responsibility weighed on him. Madam President, the Devourers will be back. Maybe not this year or next year, but they'll be back, and next time they'll be ready for our tactics. What do we need? Everything. More ships, better weapons, alliance treaties with species that will actually fight when the time comes. And most importantly, we need to keep the spirit that brought us here. The willingness to help people who need it, even when it's dangerous. The president nodded. You'll have whatever you need. But the most important moment came when Ambassador Veltar addressed the mixed assembly of human and alien representatives. The Zephyrian leader stood before the gathered crowd, his crystal body glowing with inner light. 3 months ago, my people faced extinction, he began. We asked the galaxy for help, and we were refused by every species we contacted, every species except one. He paused, looking directly at the human delegation. Humanity had no obligation to help us. We had nothing to offer in return. Our cause seemed hopeless, but when we asked for help, humans answered with a single word: yes. The alien representatives shifted uncomfortably. They knew their own species' responses had been very different. Today, my world lives because humans kept their promise. 2 billion of my people will see tomorrow because human beings decided that our lives mattered. We will never forget this loyalty. Veltar turned to address the other alien species. You offer help now after the danger is past. We accept your assistance because we understand the value of cooperation, but you should understand something important. The alliance between Zephyrians and humans was forged in battle. It is not a political arrangement that can be broken by changing circumstances. It is a bond of loyalty that will endure for as long as both our species exist. Captain Morrison watched from the audience as Veltar continued speaking. The Zephyrian was formally announcing the creation of the Human-Zephyrian Alliance, not just a treaty, but a permanent partnership between two species that had learned to trust each other completely. After the ceremony, Morrison walked through the rebuilt streets of the Zephyrian capital. The city bore scars from the Devourer attack, but it was alive with activity as people rebuilt their homes and their lives.